are going to talk about accessibility. All of my talks this week are going to be on accessibility. How many of you are working in accessibility right now, back at the office? 1, 2, 3. Okay, some hands. Some are you shy? Yes, you do that much accessibility. That's good. That's good. I want to talk to you today about lighthouses. Did you know that the oldest lighthouse in India is in Tamil Nadu? Yes? Olakakanasavara, Fire Eye. Why are lighthouses a thing? Why do they exist? This lighthouse is built on the top of a hill in a temple where they light fires to warn sailors of danger in the waters. You don't put lighthouses in the middle of a desert, do you? You put lighthouses near the water to warn us of danger. I want to talk to you about a slightly different lighthouse, Google Lighthouse. How many of you use Google Lighthouse? A few more hands go up, not many. All right, good, you're in the right session then. I would like to offer you the use of Google Lighthouse for the low price of free, okay? As a matter of fact, how many of you have Google Chrome installed right now? Oh, there we go, all the hands go up. You already have Google Lighthouse. If you have Google Chrome, you have Google Lighthouse as well. We can run it in browser, but we can also run it from the command line, which means you can run it in your CI/CD pipeline, your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. So we have a lot of things to talk about in the next hour. But to begin, the way you use Google Lighthouse is simple. You just use the web browser like you normally would. You go and visit any page you would like, and then you pull up developer tools. There are many ways you can do it. I like just right-clicking anywhere on the page and choosing Inspect. If you're a developer and you're not familiar with dev tools, you've learned two things today then, yes? Not only do you have dev tools, and you should be using them as well. So, you visit any web page, you pull up developer tools. Along the tabs, console and elements and network, all of those familiar tabs if you're familiar with DevTools, you should find Lighthouse as well. It's pushed to the end of the list. So many people say, I had no idea Lighthouse was there. You just have to go looking for it. But once you run Lighthouse, it pulls up a lovely report like this along the right-hand side of the screen, giving you scores from a 0 to 100. It gives you some nice letter grades as well, so you can see what's going on. So in this example, they visited a web page, developer.chrome.com, and you can see they have hundreds almost entirely across the board. Well, perhaps we could run a Lighthouse report on developer.chrome.com as well. Should we do that? Yes? All right. Do you hear the foreshadowing in my voice? Do you expect this website to get a perfect score of hundreds across the top? Perhaps I've said too much already. Let's find out. So you can go to any website. I hope many of you will go to your own website at some point and run Lighthouse on this, but let's do this right now. So we're going to go to developer.chrome.com. There we go. It's a lovely website. Lots of good information on there as well. We're going to get into developer tools. I said the way I like doing it is right-click and inspect. What's nice is all modern browsers have developer tools. If you go into Firefox, you can right-click and inspect. If you go to Microsoft Edge, you can right-click and inspect. But Lighthouse is a Google-only tool. So you won't find this in Firefox, you won't find this in Opera, but what we have here is the ability to run a Lighthouse report. Now, we can see that I can run this as either a mobile device or a desktop device. How much web traffic do you think is mobile-based these days? Any guesses? In India, more than 80%, yes, yes. Globally, 2/3 of all traffic is mobile-based. That's expected to reach about 3/4 of all mobile traffic within the next year or so. In India, your numbers are much higher than that, aren't they? Yes. Could you live without your smartphone? Is your smartphone the first thing you look at in the morning when you wake up? Is it the last thing you look at before you go to bed? Do you have a problem? No, not at all. That's just how we use technology, right? So the reason I'm making such a big deal about mobile is that is what Google uses for your page ranks. That's what Google uses for your SEO. So it's important to look at the mobile experience, probably more important than the desktop experience. So let's go ahead and analyze our page load. We can see that it's going to pull up this same website in mobile view. It's going to run some analysis on it, and in typically under 60 seconds, we get a report, these letter grades, and there they are. Oh my goodness, what happened to our 100%? Perhaps marketing edited that report before it was published, right? I wish we could spend time talking about performance, because performance is an amazing set of details you can learn about your page. You can see that it took 7.5 seconds. I'm looking at that red number. 7.5 seconds for the first contentful paint, the first bit of content to come up. And we can see in this film strip over here as well, we can see the page building. 7.5 seconds in order to see content. Would you wait 7.5 seconds for a web page to load? No. We want our pages to load in 3 seconds or less, which is why that number is in red. It's more than twice what our target is. So what's lovely about Lighthouse is even if you don't understand all the details, you understand green, good, right? Red, bad. And you have the ability to dig in. Now, I know the font is quite small. When you have this on your laptop, you'll be able to read it, but can you see all of the red and then the yellow over here as well? As a professional software consultant, this almost feels like cheating, because I can go to any client's website, pull up their homepage, and make wise recommendations, even if I don't understand what the recommendations are. Yes? But you should read this. You should learn this. This is good advice. When they say things like you should avoid large layout shifts. As your page is loading, things are shifting up and down. You should eliminate render blocking resources. You should serve images in the next gen format. You should reduce your unused CSS and your unused JavaScript. Do you see what I mean? It almost feels like cheating. You get an amazing, rich amount of insight. But that's performance. We're here to talk about accessibility. And in accessibility, they say, hey, your background and foreground colors don't have a sufficient contrast ratio. I think as web developers, we like writing a little code, hitting refresh, and saying, looks good to me. Is that how you do development? Refresh, looks good to me. Refresh, looks good to me. Something like color contrast is very difficult. We can't see with our eyes, especially if we have perfect vision, what people who have color blindness might be affected by, or people who might be blind in one eye or have partial vision or any number of things like that. So this report is incredibly valuable because it tells you what your own eyes possibly can't tell you as well. But I told you it's an embarrassment of riches because as I expand that out, it says, oh, here are all the items that have poor color contrast. And what's lovely is as I begin scrolling through, I can start seeing, oh, explore now, explore now, explore now, right? These are the buttons that I'm seeing over here in the right that have poor color contrast. Does that make sense? Yeah, so you don't have to do anything on your website other than just pull up the web page and run a Lighthouse report. Now, in addition to color contrast issues, they say links do not have discernible names. What this means is for your blind and low vision users, they pull up a list of links, but they have no idea where those links would go. What would you do if you received an email that had no information in it other than a link that said, click here? Would you click there? No, of course not. I have no idea where it's going. I have no idea what I'm going to see. But blind and low vision users, they say, what do you mean? That image right there that says CSS is a wrap for 2023. Right? We can visually see that, but there's no alt text behind the scene. And alt text is really important because not only does alt text help your blind and low vision users, alt text is how you get search engine optimization as well. I worked for a large client who sells tractors and farming equipment in the United States. They sell large green tractors. And they were getting to roll out a new catalog. A catalog that had 20,000 new items for sale. T-shirts and baseball hats and toys. And if you wanted to buy a baseball hat with a green tractor on it, I'm trying not to use the client's brand name. But if you were trying to buy a baseball hat with a green tractor on it, you might go to Google and type in baseball hat, green tractor, right? What is that? Alt text. That is the text describing the image. So if they're trying to sell these items and the way you're going to find it is not take a picture of the baseball hat that you would like and upload the image and have Google do image matching on it, right? That's not how you're going to do it. You're going to Google and you're going to type in words. And those words, in this case, should be the alt text describing the image. So when it comes to accessibility, I like saying I take a yes and approach. Yes and. We need alt text for our blind and low vision users, yes. And we need alt text for all of our other users as well, don't we? We need alt text for our SEO. We need alt text for our sales goals. Right? We need this for a lot of things. So Lighthouse is bringing these ideas to the forefront, making it easy to see things that perhaps we couldn't see. So we generate a Lighthouse report. We want to do it in mobile view because that's what Google uses for your page ranking. And then we come up with lovely scores like this. And as we drill down and drill down and drill down, we begin seeing a story unfold. Yes? And what's lovely about this is you can do this on your competitors' websites as well, right? This is the public web. People get worried when I come in and I do accessibility analysis on their website. They say, you're going to keep the results private, aren't you? I'm going to keep the results private for your public website? I'm going to keep the results private when literally anyone who has Google Chrome can pull up the same report that I'm doing right now. They say, why are we paying you so much money if you're just using these free tools? Well, that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it? Yes, but these tools are available to us. We should be using them. So this tool has taught us a little bit about accessibility that we didn't realize. You realize that images have been available in HTML since HTML2. HTML2 came out in roughly 1990 or so. Here we are, what, almost 30 years later? Did you know that half of all images on the internet don't have alt text? Half of all images lack alt text. It's shocking, isn't it? We've had 30 years to get it right. Maybe next year's the year. Yes? So there are other tools. When you pull up Lighthouse and you say, I wonder what it's really talking about, there's another free tool you can use called Andi, A-N-D-I. What I love about this is you can literally just drag this up to your toolbar. It's a JavaScript bookmarklet. So you don't have to do any installation at all. You simply drag Andi up to your toolbar and then you can get this same set of detailed analysis. So let's go back now and let's look at this Chrome for Developers web page. And they say background and foreground colors don't have a sufficient contrast ratio. And they show us these buttons, Explore Now, CSS Wrapped, Explore Now, What's New in DevTools. Do you see how I'm hovering over these and it's pulling up the information on screen that's having those problems? Yeah? But let's pull Andi into the mix as well. There's Andi. I just dragged it up to my list. And you can see that I can search on graphics and images, links and buttons, color contrast. Oh, color contrast, you say? Interesting. Let's take a look at that. Here, it says we've got some color contrast alerts that we need to pay attention to. There it is, Explore Now. Explore Now, right? But what's nice about Andi is that it tells us not only what your current color contrast is and what's failing, it gives you a suggestion to correct the color as well. So you never want to rely on just one tool. We want to trust but verify. We want to pull up a number of different tools and see the intersection of their recommendations. And so something like Andi makes it very easy for us to not only confirm that, yes, I have two different tools by two different vendors that are suggesting the same problems. And Andi makes me look even smarter because now not only can I say, you have poor color contrast, it's because your contrast ratio is a 4.13 and it needs to be at least a 4.5. I sound really smart now, don't I? And here's what I suggest you should change your colors to. And again, they say, Scott, we're paying you all this money and you're using this free tool. Couldn't we just use the free tool? Wouldn't you please? Wouldn't you please use this free tool? That's the whole point of this. You don't need to pay me to be around. You should be doing this on your own. So in addition to color contrast, remember we said we have some bad links. Let's take a look at the links. Oh my goodness, we have 19 elements that don't have a bad link, including this first image up here in the nav bar. Something that's going to show up on every page, something that you would expect users to click on to go home, and that link doesn't have alt text. You want blind and low vision users to click on that blindly? Yes? They don't know where they're going. And so we can see here, here's another link that has no accessible names. Here's another link that has no accessible names. So we have these really rich, free, interactive tools that we can use to test the accessibility of our website. What questions do you have at this point? Does this make sense? Is it too complicated? I hope not. Visit a web page, run a report, follow the recommendations. That's all there is to it. So, I don't know if you're familiar with the WebAIM Million report. WebAIM is an organization. They're out of the University of Utah State in the United States. They offer free tools. Their tools are called the Wave tools. You can use them as browser plugins like this, or you can use them in an automated fashion. But what's interesting is annually they run analysis of the top 1 million websites, and they report their findings. And this is what I find so interesting. So here's the 2024 report. Going all the way back to 2019, we can see these numbers change a little bit. Frankly, not enough. We see that the number one error across those million web pages is low contrast text, color contrast. 81% of all pages have a color contrast error present. Let me say that again. They surveyed 1 million web pages, and 810,000 web pages had a color contrast issue. This is the biggest problem on the internet today. And we can't tell by just looking at it. Program, refresh, looks good to me, ship it. No, we have to run some kind of report to do this analysis. Notice the second most common error, missing alt text for images. Were those the two errors that we just saw on developer.chrome.com? Yeah, Google's in good company, aren't they? They're right in the middle of that big, fat, beefy bell curve of accessibility errors. So they're in good company right there. If we round out the top 6. As a matter of fact, if you ever see on the internet hashtag fix the 6, it's exactly what they're talking about right here. Because these top 6 accessibility errors, color contrast, no alt text on images, form labels. How many of you are selling something on the internet right now? And if someone has a problem with their credit card number and you have a form field that doesn't have an HTML label element associated with the HTML input element. Half of all web forms exhibit this problem. Half of all web forms do not have labels associated with their images. And I'm not talking about free-range text that just happens to be next to that image. I'm talking about an actual angle brace label element that is for that angle brace input element. That's what we need to be semantically correct. That's what we need to be accessible. The last 3, bad links, bad buttons, missing a document language. Something so easy that if you visit a page in Hindi and you don't speak Hindi, I would expect Google to offer to translate that. It won't do that if it doesn't say this page is in Hindi. That's the only way it'll translate to American English so I can read it as well. I know the text is very small, but at the very bottom of this table, they say 96.4% of all errors detected were these 6. I'm going to say that again. 97% of all accessibilities fall into this 6 categories. If you focused on fixing these 6 categories in your website, statistically speaking, you would be solving 97% of all of your accessibility issues. Hashtag fix the 6. Yeah? All right. So, we have used Lighthouse as a manual tool. We've also used Andy as a manual tool. We discussed using the Wave plugin from the WebAIM, webaim.org, to use this kind of manual tool. Manual testing is incredibly powerful because you can pull up this page and do all kinds of introspections on it. You can make all kinds of experiments on it so you really understand what's going on. But once you've done that, once you understand what's going on, you want to move past manual testing into automated testing. And thankfully, we can automate Google Lighthouse. Otherwise, this would be a very short presentation, wouldn't it? So how do we do that? Oh my goodness. We can npm install Lighthouse? Absolutely. Lighthouse is written in JavaScript. It happens to be running in the Google Chrome browser, but you can npm install Lighthouse and then run it from the command line. Do you notice the download statistics? Almost 1 million people a week are downloading Lighthouse for exactly this reason. 1 million people a week. So I have it installed globally. So any directory I'm on, I can simply Lighthouse URL from the command line. Let's see that in action. It just so happens that I have, among other things, a command line. And I can even type. All right, so let me come here into tests. These are some tests that I've already run, but let me come in here right now and just create a GIDS 2024 directory and show you that it's a nice empty directory, nothing up my sleeve, right? So if we want to run this same report that we were doing before, all I have to do is simply Lighthouse, developer.chrome.com. Huh, that looks familiar, doesn't it? It's running that same set of things. Now, of course, since I'm running it from the command line, I have a bunch of command line flags. I could run --desktop or --mobile. I can throttle the network performance. When you're running in mobile mode, it's emulating a 4G network because you don't want to have a fast Ethernet connection for your performance tests, right? We want to try to give it real-world performance. So from the command line, you can throttle the network even more. From the command line, you can set the size of your screen. You can emulate specific devices. There are a lot of things you can do, but we can see here that we end up with a report. There we go. So it's auditing a number of different things. Those are all the individual audits that we saw there, but since this is from the command line, it's reporting it as text. But this wouldn't be much of an automated tool if you had to be hanging out at the command line to see the results. So they say this report has been written to here, this HTML report, or they say you could run it with a --view at the end if you wanted to see what's going on. So there is the report that it ran, and I can open it up in the browser of my choice. And there's that same accessibility report that we would expect to see. What's interesting about this, though, so if I move up for a moment, and let's see what our custom config looks like. We can have config files where we can begin narrowing. As much as I love the performance metrics and the SEO metrics and things like that, I could come in here and limit this to only accessibility if that's what I wanted to do. As a matter of fact, there are lots of things I can do from the command line. I'm going to go ahead and run Lighthouse against developer.chrome.com, but I'm only going to look at the categories accessibility. My output I want to have in both HTML and JSON and comma separated values, and I want to run this headless as well. So if I go ahead and go ahead and run this again. We're going to see the same data. This should run a little bit faster because I'm only doing accessibility checks. We can see those accessibility audits coming down the list. And then at the bottom, do you see how that it wrote to not only an HTML file? That's good for the humans. But we have JSON, JavaScript object notation, which is good for the machines. And actually, CSV is really nice. JSON, you know, is a deeply nested structure. So we could have a value that has an array of values that has an array of values. CSV is nice because it's a simple two-dimensional array. So it makes it very easy for you to say, import that into a database, or import it into an Excel spreadsheet so you can do further analysis on it. We've run Lighthouse now from the command line. This is what our HTML report would look like. Notice I just ran accessibility numbers, and so I just have accessibility showing. But I have JSON as well. This is a really rich JSON report. So I can see things like, oh, here's my access key audits, and here's the score I got. This was not applicable because I didn't have any access keys there. This is something that I think is important as well. In the credits, they say that Google Lighthouse is using Axe tools under the cover. AXE, Axe tools. That's yet another free set of tools that I encourage you to look at. Axe tools are by a company called Deque, D-E-Q-U-E. Deque offers Axe tools as a browser plugin, so you can use that. It also allows you to run it as a part of your CI/CD pipeline. So in fact, when you're using Google Lighthouse, you're using Deque's Axe tools under the covers so you can see this information. And here's what it looks like in its CSV value as well. Here's this accessibility, access keys, null. Yes, access keys, description, and so on and so forth. And there's the link to Deque University right there. So we're talking about tools, but I'm trying to give you some context as well for all of this. We've mentioned the WebAIM Million that surveyed 1 million websites and did accessibility analysis on them. The Web Almanac, which is a part of the HTTP archive, they do this same kind of analysis on 8.5 million websites. The Web Almanac is published annually once as well, and you can see using Web Page Test and Lighthouse, they turn around and visit 8.5 million websites. Now they do this analysis only on their homepage, but they do it from both a mobile lens and a desktop lens as well. I happen to co-author the accessibility chapter for 2 years running, 2021 and 2022. They didn't publish last year, and 2024, it sounds like it's in flight. We should look at that around Q4 of this year. But in this accessibility chapter, realize we've gone from 1 million websites to 8.5 million websites. What do we see? We see that only 22% of all websites have sufficient color contrast. So notice that the Web Almanac is expressing it in the positive, that only 22% of websites have good color contrast. If we go back and look real quickly at WebAIM, we can see that 81% of the websites do not have good color contrast. So it's helpful once again when we have these various tools and they all align with each other. That's kind of what you're looking for, isn't it? You want to make sure that if you don't like one doctor's opinion, you get another doctor's opinion. And if they gave you the same opinion, you could maybe see a third, but by the time you've seen 3 or 4 doctors and they tell you the same thing, you could probably believe their advice at that point, yes? And so now if WebAIM is telling us that we have a problem with our color contrast, and Andy is telling us that we have a problem with our color contrast, and Axe Tools and Lighthouse are telling us we have a problem with color contrast, and even the Web Almanac tells us we have a problem with our color contrast. I don't know how many more doctors you want to talk to at this point. The numbers are clear. Yes?
See, after visiting so many doctors, right?
Yes.
The patient takes the medication or the actions, nothing changes. So are the companies really looking at this data and changing their accessibility?
This is a wonderful question. If I can rephrase, you said after the patient has seen so many doctors and the patient is not still taking their medicine, who do we talk to at that point? That's a hard problem, isn't it? That's a hard problem. This is a very real problem. Accessibility is a very real problem in our industry. And your question is, how come more companies aren't doing something about this? I wish I had a good answer for that. And what's so nice about these reports is they are longitudinal over time. So here's the archive, that in 2019, it was a 22%, only 22% of all pages had good color contrast. In 2021, it was 21.1%, 22.2, 22.9. I call those statistically insignificant changes, right? We can say that it's been kind of a consistent problem all this time. The question is, how do we get companies to pay attention to this? How do we get companies to care about this? I do it from an accessibility lens, but you've heard me say, maybe we should talk about this from a sales lens. Maybe we should talk about this from an SEO perspective. Maybe we should get marketing involved in these kinds of things. We have to look at this holistically, not just through an accessibility lens. 1 in 4 people in the world have a disability. 1 out of 4 people, 25% of the planet, has a disability. 25% of the world has some form of disability. If you have a disability, any disability, you are a member of the largest minority in the world. So I try to come to companies and say, are you ignoring a quarter of your potential customers through these actions? We got to find the right way to catch their attention, don't we? I'm hoping I'm giving you lots of good options. So, Lighthouse is a very powerful manual tool. Lighthouse is a very powerful automated tool. The title of this talk is Continuous Accessibility. Can we turn around and run these kinds of tests continuously? Absolutely, and we should. If you have diabetes, you might take a blood test every morning when you wake up to see what your resting blood sugar levels are, right? You run this test every day. You might get on the scale every day. You might exercise every day. You might do these kinds of things every day. So the point of accessibility testing is it's not a one-time thing you do. You need to do this on an ongoing basis. I say accessibility testing is kind of like brushing your teeth. Are you one and done? Oh, I brushed my teeth once when I was 16. It was glorious. My mouth felt so good. Haven't brushed my teeth since. That'll solve the problem very quickly. Well, ultimately, you won't have teeth to brush, and so the problem will solve itself. Yeah? So how do we run these Lighthouse reports continuously? Well, there's a project out there called Unlighthouse. UN Lighthouse, not United Nations, right? They're just trying to be clever here. And Unlighthouse does something interesting that Google Lighthouse doesn't. Google Lighthouse is a single-page tool. you notice that you visit a web page and you run a report. From the command line, you type in Lighthouse and give it a URL, and you view the report. So what Unlighthouse does is it allows you to point it at a top-level URL, and it automatically does a scan throughout the entire website. So Lighthouse is still a fundamentally single-page testing tool, but something like Unlighthouse allows you to do a single-page test across every page in your website, and then rolls up those results. So just like we npm installed Lighthouse, you can npm install Unlighthouse as well, and I recommend you do it globally so that in any directory you can type in Unlighthouse -- and give it a URL. And what it'll do then is it will start at whatever top level page you give it and work its way down from there. Does this sound like what Google does to your website anyway? Absolutely. Google and Bing and Yahoo and Alta Vista, and I don't know what other search engines are out there at this point, right? But they all do basically the same type of thing. So what we can do, in fact, is be our own Google. We can be our own Bing. We can spider our own websites and surface performance issues and surface SEO issues, and surface accessibility issues as well. What's nice is Unlighthouse kind of gives you this top-level view where as you go through all of your pages, it gives you a quick glimpse of all those Lighthouse scores, but then you can turn around and drill in to any one of those individual pages to get these details. So this is really what Unlighthouse looks like. It allows you to run across all the pages in your website and then gives you a nice top-level overview, but then it's still Lighthouse under the covers, so you still get the familiar reports that you're used to dealing with. Of course, Unlighthouse will give you the ability to not only produce HTML reports, but JSON reports and CSV reports as well.
How we can audit the website that are authenticated?
Very good question. Can you audit authenticated websites as well? Yes, from the command line you can pass in usernames and passwords and things like that. So this tool can absolutely be used behind the firewall as well as for your public-facing website. Very good question. So when I run Unlighthouse -- site developer.chrome.com, it says, well, I found a file called robots.txt. Robots.txt is typically in the root of your web page. Go looking for it. Robots.txt is a love letter to robots, like the Google Web Spider, saying, here's what we think you should do, here's what we don't think you should do. Yeah, go ahead and index these pages. These index pages are temporary or hidden or private. Ignore those kinds of things. But you notice that just out of the box, Unlighthouse will just survey the top 200 pages. So it'll visit 200 pages and do that. Of course, from the command line, we can override that. We can say, no, visit all these web pages, or we can give it a specific set of pages to visit. A lot of times I like doing user journey testing, which is saying something like, all right, someone is going to visit the home page, and then they're going to click on the login button, and then they're going to provide a username and password, and then they're going to go to the catalog, and then they're going to add 4 items to the shopping cart, and then they're going to check out. That's a user journey, and you can see it hit a number of different pages: a home page, a login page, a catalog page, a shopping cart. Can we do Lighthouse reports across all that? Absolutely. Can we do Unlighthouse reports across that? Absolutely. We just provide a list of URLs in the order we want them to be visited in. So, on developer.chrome.com, here is what the robots.txt file looks like. And you can see in there, they say, oh, look, we've got a sitemap. Developer.chrome.com/sitemap.xml. So all of a sudden, Unlighthouse says, I'm not in spider mode. It says, I could be in spider mode just visiting your homepage and getting a list of all the hyperlinks in that homepage and then visiting them. And then for every page subsequent to that, get a list of links. If I already visited, ignore. If this is a new link, visit. I could spider like that, or I could use a sitemap. And this is what the sitemap.xml looks like, and it provides you a link to a more detailed sitemap. And when you visit that, it gives you a rich set of details. This is, of course, all industry standard stuff. This should be available across all web servers, all websites as well. So Unlighthouse is something I used. Most recently, I was the head of accessibility for a software consultancy that focused on the US government. As it turns out, there's a law in the United States. The law is called Section 508. And Section 508 says, if you visit a federal website, it must be accessible. It's the law. I visited 8,724 federal web pages. I found 66,500 accessibility errors. We could do this on the Indian government's website as well. As soon as I am safely back in the United States, please give me a call. I'd be happy to perform that analysis for you. Elections are Friday, yes? I'll be home by Monday. We should talk. But if you go to section508.com, section508pro.com, you can see these numbers themselves. This is a custom website I built, but it uses Lighthouse under the covers. It uses Unlighthouse under the covers to provide these kinds of statistics. So I say, here's a nice pie chart of all the various errors that we find in there. The big wedges of this pie are color contrast, are images that are lacking alt text, are forms that are lacking labels on their fields, all of the common things. But now I can say, well, based on the Web Almanac, based on the Web A-million, I can use these federal websites and see if they statistically are falling under these same numbers. And in fact, they are. In fact, they are. I think it's important to do this analysis over time. I ran this analysis just for a week. Just for a week, and we can see how these numbers varied. When I started, I came in at about 62,500 errors. It dropped down to below 60. I'm like, oh, this is a good trend. And then every day for the rest of that week, that accessibility number went up. And I was so depressed on the last day, I just couldn't run the reports anymore. No, that's not what happened. I just wanted to get 7 days of data so we can see this analysis. So it's important, isn't it, that if you have diabetes, that you take that blood test every morning. And so if your blood sugar does spike one morning, you can say, I shouldn't have had that second slice of birthday cake. That was the problem, right? And if your accessibility numbers get worse, and you said, oh, we did have a major software release on Friday, and we saw our accessibility numbers spike. You can go and look at the new features that were released and narrow your focus to see what accessibility problems were introduced with that latest code release. Yeah? These are the federal agencies. When you see this number of 400, and I tell you, well, Unlighthouse just samples 200 web pages out of the box, and I visited 200 desktop pages, and I visited 200 mobile pages, this is how we get to that 400 number. And we can see that, for this agency, I visited 400 web pages and only had 2,000 accessibility errors. But for the Department of Energy, DOE, I visited 400 web pages and found over 25 5,000 accessibility errors. I want to talk to someone at the Department of Energy. Is it really? Will you share her email with me, please? Denver, Colorado. Very nice. We should talk. So what I've done here now is we can drill down into any individual page. And through a combo box, I can see type mobile, type desktop. I give you a drop down for the date of that page, and then that drop down is each individual page underneath it. And so from there on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see Lighthouse. And on the left hand of the screen, you can see WCAG, W-C-A-G. Has anyone heard of WCAG? The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is published by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. The same organization that publishes the HTML spec, they publish the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines as well. So I can pull this up live so we can see it as well here. But if we go to section508pro.com, we can turn around and drill in and see these history reports and see the federal agencies and come down to the Department of Energy. And there are these errors on the right-hand side. Here are these Lighthouse errors. Interestingly, 18 list items. They have 18 LIs on the page without a surrounding UL, unordered list, or OL, ordered list. So this is something where they just have list items just floating around on the page. All we have to do is wrap that in a proper list element, and that problem goes away. But what's so nice about this tool is that I can turn around and link it back to specific WCAG success criteria. So if you're evaluating your website based on WCAG standards, and you should be, because that's what Lighthouse does, that's what the Web A Million report does, that's what the Web Almanac does, that's what Axe tool does. That's what Wave does. That's what the Andy tool does. Do you see what I'm saying? I could go on, but I won't. We're almost out of time. But WCAG is the core set of standards, and WCAG has been adopted by the UN. WCAG is at the foundation of Section 508. WCAG is at the foundation of accessibility laws in the UK and Japan and Germany and Australia. WCAG is our source of truth. So we're able to turn around and figure out how we're doing from a WCAG perspective. So what I want to leave you with is this. This open source tool I've created is called Accessibility View. As a matter of fact, if you go to accessibilityview.com, you can get another look at Unlighthouse and Lighthouse in action. I'm from Colorado. The state of Colorado has an accessibility law in the books. It's called HB 211110. It just rolls off the tongue like Shakespearean prose, doesn't it? HB 211110, but it says the same thing, that for the state of Colorado, every state agency, every county agency, every city agency must meet WCAG standards. On April 29th, I visited 4,263 web pages. I found 8,800 errors. So these websites, whether it's section508pro.com that allows us to look at the federal agency level, or accessibilityview.com, we can view state of Colorado. We can see these agencies, and the Colorado Department of Education, CDE, has some problems, don't they? Here are the errors they have. Well, what do you know? Color contrast, number 1 error on the web. Alt text, number 2 error on the web. Bad links, definitely in the top fix the 6 errors. So if you want to see these kinds of things in action, you can simply go to github.com, not /thirstyhead, that's me, but you can go to accessibility view. And once you sign in, you can download this source code and you can actually see all of the data from the federal websites in the state of Colorado as well. And I want to revisit that idea once again because, in fact, these are public-facing websites. And all the tools I've mentioned are free and open source here as well. So part of my goal here is to make your company successful with accessibility. But my larger goal is to make the web a better place to be. And I hope that's your goal as well. Did you enjoy yourself? I did as well. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Namaste.